Welcome to America's Top Rebbetzins. May this class be for Refuah Shalema for Ariella Bat Sarah, Eitan Bat Zechariah Ariella, Leah Hannah Batova, and Hannah Bat Masha. Please click on the subscribe button to subscribe to us on the America's Top Rebbetzins YouTube page, or click follow to follow us on your podcasting app so that you are the first to know when an inspiring new episode is posted. I am honored to have on today's show Rebbetzin Channy Lapine. Rebbetzin Channy, along with her husband, Rabbi Avraham, run the Chabad Jewish Center of Missouri University in Missouri. Rebbetzin Channy hosts weekly Shabbat dinners that provide Jewish students with an intimate setting to eat, a place to make new friends from every niche of the campus community, and celebrate Shabbat in a spiritual and intellectually stimulating manner. She also runs creative holiday programs to raise Jewish consciousness and pride to the community. She gives Torah classes, and she meets with students individually. And this is the coolest thing I think that you do. She also brings chicken soup to the University of Missouri students when they are sick. Wow. That is really, really so cool. You provide this comfort to students who are away from home. So thank you so much for being here. Please tell us more about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so like you said, we run Chabad on campus here at University of Missouri, also known as Mizzou. And yeah, it's a privilege. I love doing it. I feel really inspired by the students who they have so much going on campus, but they'll come for Friday night dinner, for Shabbat dinner, and put up a mezuzah. Each time it's inspiring to be here for them. We also serve the broader Jewish community in many different ways. Just here to support them. It's a small community. But yeah, like my husband, there's just so many different ways that we're here for them. My husband has a levaya today. Sometimes it means, a holiday program. There's just Torah classes, a minyan here and there. So that, along with, we also have 7 children, Baruch Hashem, and we homeschool. So we're pretty busy.
Wow, yeah. For sure. Yes. Wow.
Yeah,
well, I'm sure the students really appreciate you being there because you really provide the center of Jewish life for them while they're away from home, while they're at school. So it's amazing.
And like you said, the chicken soup, that's my favorite part. Just being their family and being here for them.
Yeah, you really are. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about a topic that can often be confusing and misunderstood. So today we are going to hopefully clear up a lot of misconceptions. We're going to talk about kashrut. So kashrut is a set of dietary laws dealing with the foods that Jewish people are permitted to eat and how those foods must be prepared according to Jewish law. And there is a lot to say about kashrut. So let's start at the beginning, and then it's going to get more interesting and more detailed. I promise. This is actually going to be a very, very interesting interview. So let's start at the beginning. Can you please tell us the fundamental principles of kashrut as well as the types of foods that we can and cannot eat?
Sure. So yeah, there's a lot to kashrut, much more than that could be said in a short podcast. But so just to start the basics. So the Torah describes the animals that are kosher by telling us the 2 signs, which is the split hooves and chuzas cud. And then when it comes to fish, it's fins and scales that make the fish kosher. And then fowl, the Torah tells us 24 non-kosher birds of prey that we can't eat. And then the ones that we could eat, we know from tradition are more domesticated birds, which are chicken and duck, geese, turkey, and pigeon. So that's birds and fowl. And then we can't eat any bugs or any reptiles, stuff like that. So that basically sums up the types of foods that we can eat. Fruits and vegetables are usually fine. Of course, unless it comes from the Holy Land, then there's certain, in Israel, there's certain other laws that apply to fruits and vegetables of Israel. And then there's the way that we slaughter animals, which would have to be in a special way, which is with a very sharp knife, and it's called shechita, and there's lots of laws with that. But it's a nicer way, but it's basically a less, it hurts less because it's very quick with a very sharp knife. So that's the slaughtering, and there's a lot that goes into that. And then there's basically the kosher kitchen, which is having meat and dairy separate. Yeah, what I love about the topic of kosher is that, you know, Judaism is unique in that, like, it's not all about the synagogue. It's not all about going to the synagogue. It's really all about the home. And kosher is like, it's about how we eat, how we live. And kosher is a very different way of eating. And every single day we can connect to Hashem in this special way. So that's what's cool about kosher. But anyway, that's the basics.
I love that. And so we're gonna build on that right now. So thank you for laying down the basics, because now we're gonna get into those questions that everybody has. So here it is. Here's the first one. And I got this from people, who listen to my podcast. So these are their questions. So I understand that we can't mix dairy and meat because we can't cook a calf in its mother's milk. That's what it says in the Torah. We can't cook a calf in its mother's milk. However, a question came in from one of our listeners, and she asks, why can't we mix dairy with chicken? So in other words, like a chicken parmesan, something like that, as opposed to red meat. She brings up a good point, because chickens do not make their own milk. So there's no chance of mixing meat and milk. So can you please explain the prohibition behind eating chicken parmesan?
Okay. So the Torah doesn't differentiate when it comes to meat and milk. We don't differentiate between what types of kosher meat and what types of milk. We can't mix them in any way, shape, or form. So when it comes to chicken, so it doesn't say chicken in the Torah. Chicken is a fowl. It's not a meat, right?
Right.
So that is a good question. However, the reason why we don't eat chicken parmesan is because when basically the rabbis instituted that chicken would be considered meat, just like meat, because of the way it's slaughtered. So because of that special way of slaughtering that I was speaking about before, the shechita, so in order not to get mixed up which meats you can't mix with milk, the rabbis instituted that chicken would be just considered the same as, or any meat that is slaughtered is the same as meat, like an animal, from an animal.
Okay, so
does that make sense?
Yes. So because of the way that chicken's slaughtered. So a chicken is slaughtered. If I just want to clarify, in the similar way that, let's say, a cow is slaughtered with that. And I'm imagining it. I've never slaughtered any animal, but I'm imagining a very, very sharp knife slicing the neck. Is that kind of like how it is?
Yeah, that's kind of how it is. Yeah.
Okay. And that kind of slicing is the same for the chicken. It's the same for the turkey. It's the same for a cow.
Yeah. Okay. And I should mention, so when it comes to slaughtering, there also are laws in how it has to be salted and rinsed so that we take out all the blood, because blood is also not kosher.
Good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a lot to kosher.
There really, really is. So I'm going to ask you an interesting question. So, okay, so we can't eat chicken parmesan. We can't eat a cheeseburger, a beef cheeseburger. Okay, I understand that. So now I want to ask you, now in this day and age, we're getting really creative with food. What about like a vegan cheeseburger? Like, what about like a Beyond Burger, like or a bean burger that we make at home, beans and vegetables and all kinds of stuff together, no meat, just beans, and just put a slice of cheddar on top, melt it in the oven, and put it between two buns, and that's lunch. Like, is that okay?
That's great. Sounds great. That's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, we do a lot of that type of stuff because we like meat, but we also like the veggie burgers and stuff like that.
So so a Beyond Burger or a veggie burger or a bean burger with a slice of any kind of cheese, that's good. Okay.
Yeah, totally fine.
Okay. So in addition to the actual kosher foods that we eat, we have separate dishes. We have separate cookware. So not just dishes, bowls and plates, but also cookware, separate pots, separate pans, and we have separate utensils for milk and for meat. We can't even use the same plates or pots or forks for both meat and dairy, even if we wash them really, really well under scalding hot water. So now I've often heard it said that years ago in Europe, many people were poor and they couldn't afford a separate set of pots and pans and dishes and all that. They only had the one pot, the one dish, the one fork. They shared everything and they used it all to cook everything, way, way back when. So I'm honestly not sure what they did back then because I wasn't there. I have no idea. So I don't know how they managed to keep kosher. Is it absolutely necessary to have separate meat and dairy equipment now? And if so, why? And also, if you can shed any type of light as to what they did back in Europe, when they only had that one pot and pan, that would be amazing.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So yeah, definitely we do have to have separate pots and pans and dishes. Glassware, like for drinking, is less of an issue. But so you're allowed to use for either one.
So can I
But when
just
it
ask
comes
you,
to like,
can I ask
yeah,
why? Because I also, when I'm washing the dishes, sometimes I'll wash glass and think, okay, well, I washed it with a meat sponge. Can I still drink a smoothie out of it? So why is it for glass that could be used for both?
yeah. So technically it's fine, but we just now because we have the ability to, we just like to have everything separate for glassware, because glassware is a different type of material. So it's just a little different how it absorbs.
So is it because the glass isn't porous? Is that why?
Honestly, I'm not sure exactly why. I
Okay.
just know that there's different materials and the way that things absorb is different.
Okay.
Like let's say it comes to like tinware or ceramic glass. So glass is something that's, first of all, it's not kosherable. Like you can't kosher it if you put it under like boiling hot water. So, but at the same time, it also doesn't really, it doesn't get like affected by the product that's in it.
That is so fascinating. Okay. So, but we should still keep the meat Pyrex glass pans for separate from the dairy ones, just for
Yeah.
delineation purposes, so we don't confuse them. And but that's just so interesting to me. I just have to take a second to absorb that because it's fascinating. For ceramic, I understand because I know that it's porous, and it absorbs the taste
Yeah.
of the chicken when you cook, you could, there's still chicken in that ceramic pan even after you wash it, so you're not going to cook
Right.
a lasagna in it. But it's just so interesting that glass isn't affected by that. That's okay. That's so interesting. I'm sorry, go on. I just had to absorb that.
Yeah. No, I'm not exactly sure how it comes because there's also Pyrex, and I don't know if I think that would be put in the oven. I don't know all the ins and outs. Like I said, there's so much to this, and to really understand, like in each situation, it's really helpful to know, your local Orthodox rabbi and call them because there's so many nuances to each situation. But generally, yeah. So generally, you have to have separate pots and pans, dishes. And now in the olden days, I imagine that they didn't have so much. So they had like one set. They either used it for meat or milk when it came to hot things. And then cold is less of an issue. So they could just use their cold. I mean, if they usually didn't have much meat, only on Shabbat probably,
Right.
and holidays. Um, so I don't know. I'm imagining that's how they went about it.
That's interesting. Okay. Or if maybe one family had a set of meat dishes and another one said had a set of dairy dishes, then they could swap. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's less than an issue when it comes to cold. So they could just rinse it off if it was cold,
So okay, so in
and
other
then
words,
just use it for meat.
okay, so if you had a plate and let's say you had a cheese sandwich on there, for example, you finish eating the cheese sandwich, it was cold, not a melted cheese sandwich, a cold cheese sandwich, you wash it underwater, it's clean. Now you could have chicken on there.
Yeah, something hot.
Something.
Yeah, I'm at, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Technically, yeah.
Okay.
These days we have the ability to
Just
be
to
more
keep
careful.
separate.
So
Yes.
we just do everything separate, and we have our dishwashers. We're just very spoiled these days. So we might as well, have double of everything. In my kitchen, we hold the whole meat side, a whole milk side, two different ovens. Those days they just had one oven. They probably
Right.
just used it for meat.
Right. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So in addition to the physical component of kashrut, such as separating the milk and meat and not eating certain foods like shellfish and pork, there's a spiritual aspect of kashrut. And there's something that happens to a person spiritually when they eat non-kosher food. Some people who are skeptical about keeping kosher think, well, what happens to you if you eat non-kosher food? People eat non-kosher food all the time and nothing happens to them. They don't drop dead. They don't get sick. Why do we need to keep kosher? So in order to help answer this question, can you please tell us more about the effect that the food we eat has on us spiritually? Because it's true. If a Jew, God forbid, a million times, if a Jew goes into a restaurant and eats a ham sandwich, they're most likely not going to drop dead on the spot. They're not. They'll walk out. They'll be fine. They can continue on their day. But I feel like something happens to them spiritually. And it's not just ham, it's any unkosher food. What happens?
So kosher is a very unique mitzvah. Another reason why it's very unique is because there's no other mitzvah that we're literally digesting it.
Yes.
I mean, there's matzah, but we basically are digesting this food. It becomes who we are, like the saying, like you are what you eat. So it really does make a very big difference to us spiritually. And it's true. It really, it's a Jewish diet, it's the way that we Jews have, ate food for years and years. It's our makeup. It makes us more spiritually sensitive. So there's definitely truth to it that if we eat non-kosher food, we become less sensitive to spirituality. And so that's why it is a very important mitzvah, and it does make a difference. Yeah.
Okay. So when you say that we become less sensitive to spirituality or less spiritually sensitive, what exactly does that mean?
So I'll tell you what I see people that when they start keeping kosher,
Mhm.
let's put it this way, you can see a difference. You can see that they feel more for Judaism. They feel more for spirituality. And it makes you feel more attracted to Hashem, to the Torah, to the mitzvahs as a Jew Yeah.
Wow. That's an interesting perspective, right? Like when somebody who hasn't kept kosher, then they start keeping the laws of kashrut, they become more inclined and more sensitive toward Jewish things spiritually. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The Ramban says that there's no real reason why we keep kosher. We keep kosher because Hashem told us. It's one of the it's one of the mitzvot called chukim, right? Those are just statutes, they're just laws. We do it because Hashem said. There's no real reason. But the Ramban, Nachmanides, he explains that that perhaps the reason or one of the benefits of keeping kosher is that we become more refined because we're not eating animals that are wild animals, and the birds that we eat are not birds of prey. They're domesticated birds and domesticated animals. So we gain their attributes as a result of eating, these types of animals. We become less aggressive and less all these attributes that come from more wild animals and species.
Wow. I'm taking in that concept. That's a fascinating concept, right? Because birds of prey, you're right. They're wild animals and they have certain types of behaviors. And I'm not saying that, chickens or cows are not wild animals. I mean, they are, but they're more refined. They have more of a gentle nature than, let's say, a crocodile, or a wildebeest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I like that. I really like that. So now I'm going to ask a very interesting question. It's a controversial question. Cholov Yisrael. So no discussion of kashrut would be complete without talking about Cholov Yisrael dairy products. The term Cholov Yisrael refers to kosher milk that came from a cow that was milked while it was being watched over by an observant Jew. In other words, an observant Jew oversaw the milking of the cows. So I understand that Cholov Yisrael milk is different from milk that has a regular kosher certification, like an OU or an OUD. Can you please explain to us the significance of Cholov Yisrael milk and how that's different from an OUD certification?
Yeah. So, Chabad takes Cholov Yisrael very seriously.
Yes.
We're very strict about it. So for us, we won't make any exceptions, even living out here in Columbia, Missouri, where we can't get Cholov Yisrael milk or cheeses. But some communities have a different custom. So, and they'll, in certain situations, they'll have OUD or non-Cholov Yisrael products. But we're very strict about it. So we have our almond milk, and sometimes we'll get some milk in, which is nice, but we don't drink anything that's not Cholov Yisrael.
So what is the difference? Like why does Chabad insist on Cholov Yisrael? Like what is the spiritual significance of Cholov Yisrael versus OUD?
So, where did it come from? Is that the question?
Yeah.
So there's a certain, it's basically I guess it's a certain leniency in certain cases that people would be able to have, milk that's not watched by a Jew, because the FDA supervises it to a certain extent in America.
Yes.
So that's where it kind of comes from. But because this is instituted, way before FDA, we take this very seriously, and we don't drink anything that hasn't been watched by a Jew. our community, the Chabad community.
Right. So it's interesting because I heard Rabbi Manis Friedman, he was once giving a talk about Cholov Yisrael, and he was saying that there is some kind of a spiritual significance. Like it's an elevated type of milk.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like I was saying before about you are what you eat.
Yes.
So if you're gonna be very careful with Cholov Yisrael, most likely you'll be more sensitive to spirituality in the same way as being careful about kosher. I mean, to a different degree, but similar to the concept of keeping kosher makes you more sensitive to Judaism and spirituality. So it's a similar type of connection here.
I like that. And now this makes me think of, okay, so we're talking Cholov Yisrael only refers to dairy products, but now I would just want to ask you another question about meat because I'm thinking of the term Glatt kosher. What is the difference between Glatt kosher and just regular kosher?
Right. So Glatt kosher is like, it's smooth. It means it's smooth, which means there's no, maybe it wasn't really watched over here. Maybe it wasn't so perfect over there. It means that it's really kosher, all the way kosher, without any maybes.
Okay. Is that's the highest level of kashrut, like on the meat side? Cholov Yisrael, I guess, is the highest level of kashrut on the dairy side. But on the meat side, when Jews look for meat, should they look for Glatt kosher or?
Well, basically, kosher is Glatt kosher when it comes to meat.
Okay.
Because once it's not really Glatt kosher, it's really not so kosher. We don't really know the kosher level of it. So when it comes to meat, it's a little bit different. Everybody that keeps kosher usually keeps Glatt kosher.
Okay. And that makes sense. Okay. I like that. Thank you. That explains a lot about kashrut. Now, is there anything else, like before we end, I just wanted to see if maybe there's anything else that you would like to share with us about kashrut, either about the actual halacha of kashrut, or maybe about the students that you've seen in your college on the campus, about them becoming, going from not keeping kosher to keeping kashrut, just anything like that you'd like to share.
Sure. So like everything in Judaism, it's not all or nothing. And when it comes to kosher, it's the same. So, if a person wants to take on a step of keeping kosher, it's important to just discuss with, a rabbi or Rebbetzin or whoever you're in contact with and talk about, what is a good first step for me? Because every step in Judaism and especially in like kosher, which is such an important mitzvah because it becomes who we are. So every step, is important and makes a big difference. So you can't be like, oh, I don't keep kosher, it's fine. But if you just, maybe, oh, I only eat kosher meat. And that happens a lot. We have a lot of students that will come and say, can we buy some kosher meat off you? Because you can't really get it local. So, and that's a beautiful way to keep kosher in whatever, in the setting that you're in or at the level that you're at now. And we're always increasing and adding in our Judaism. So one day maybe you'll do a little bit more, but it always, even just a little bit of trying to keep kosher, looking for kosher products in the store that have an OU or OK. Because, you could buy one without an OU or OK, but why not just get the one that's kosher? So just like adding little steps is huge.
That's beautiful. And I like what you said. It's really not all or nothing. So maybe you start with keeping just kosher meat and then everything else is not kosher. And then you start little by little, kosher cheeses, kosher condiments, kosher, whatever you're buying that's kosher. And then you can move on with the kosher dishes and kosher pots and pans.
Yeah. And kosher in your kitchen. And yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebbetzin Channy, for joining us on America's Top Rebbetzins. It was truly a pleasure to have you with us. And may the tremendous learning that we did today be for Refuah Shlema, for Zecharias Shalom, Ben Batsheva Simcha, Leah Hana Batova, and Hana Bat Masha, and also for Eitan Bat Zevadia, Ariella, and Ariella Vatsera. Thank you so much.
Amen. And also a Refuah Shlema, if I can add.
Yes.
For a friend of mine, a shlucha, a Rebbetzin, Henya Bat Bracha Devorah Leah.
Amen. Thank you so much for adding her name. Amen.